Hey everyone, I'm Bhante Sujato and welcome to Buddhist Futures, part 4 of 4. And in the talk today, I'm going to look to what a possible future might be. And during the course of these 4 discussions, we looked first of all at the Buddha, the futures of the Buddha. So what kind of things that the Buddha foresaw in the future, but also, perhaps more importantly, the manner in which he foresaw them. He didn't claim to be like a prophet or something like that, but he would understand the trends and the tendencies that were happening around him and was able to extrapolate and infer what was likely to happen should people act in a certain way. So the Buddha's understanding about the future is all based on causality, it's not based on destiny. And so this, I think, is the most important thing to understand about the Buddhist attitude to the future, that the future is not something that is written in stone. It's not something which is fated or foretold. It's something that we create through our choices, and that we build the future that we will live in. We do that on an immediate and personal level by the way that we use our minds right now, by the emotions that we have, by the way that we choose to direct our attention, by the things that we choose to do or they leave undo, by the things we choose to say or to leave unsaid. And all of these are building up our own personal future. But in addition to that, they're also working collectively with those of others to create a future for all of us. And everybody in the world right now has a future which is a haze of probabilities and possibilities and might-haves and maybe wouldn'ts. Which one of those futures is going to become real? In the second talk, I looked at my own personal history of the different kinds of the future, and I looked in particularly through the lens of the evolution of the idea of the future through science fiction, and the idea of how do we imagine what the future might be. And I think that there has been, certainly in my own life, there's been a shift and an evolution in how the future is regarded and what kinds of possible futures that we might be able to imagine. And that the naive techno-utopian vision of the future that maybe prevailed in stories coming from the 1950s gave way to a more nuanced understanding that technology, in a sense, couldn't triumph over ecology and nature, and especially human nature. And as this realization came about, there's also the understanding or the perception that technology was somehow becoming out of control. And we had the dystopian movement starting from the 80s, where people, rather than being liberated and freed by the future, were becoming trapped by it. And so we are trapped by the vision of the future, which is owned by a few. Last week, I looked at the immediate consequences of some of our actions, especially through the lens of climate change. And climate change is one area where it's extremely clear that if we do keep on doing as we have been doing, then we are headed for an almost certain doom. The depictions of the future of our planet provided to us by science invariably depict a future where the environment is less kind and less welcoming and less flourishing than it is today. The number of species will plummet drastically. The number of areas where human beings can live comfortably will plummet drastically. The amount of food that we can grow will plummet drastically. These are things that are not really not really in doubt. The only thing what's in doubt is the degree to which that they're going to happen. So for today, I'd like to talk a bit more about a possible or an imaginary future. And to do this, I'm going to step forward about 500 years. And I'm going to imagine what it was going to be like there. So I somehow got access to a time machine and blipped forward 500 years to the future. What is life like? And so here I go, and I step outside of my building in Sydney, in Harris Park. And, things have changed a lot in Harris Park. And so first thing you notice is that there are a lot fewer buildings around, but those buildings are a lot bigger than they were. Mostly tall skyscrapers, and in between those, a lot of parklands. And all of the parklands around the harbour and so on have been extended. A lot of the waterways, which were trapped into concrete and so on, have been restored. And so I'm having a nice time, actually, just wandering around through paths, feeling like I want to take my shoes off and walk on the bare soil, because the earth feels nice. And it's a funny thing about cities is that they make the earth dirty. If you go into the outback, into the desert, the earth doesn't feel dirty anymore. It feels clean. And so here in this Sydney of the future, this Parramatta of the future, the earth feels somehow clean. Like I want to, that feeling like if you're walking on the beach and you want to take your shoes off and walk on the sand. That kind of feeling. And through the parklands I walk, and the sky looks nice. Nice and clear and crisp. And, I can see through the parkland, there's plenty of people around. Lots of different kinds of people. All different kind of skin colours and different ages and things like that. And people are wandering around, just, relaxing, enjoying themselves in the parkland. And so gradually as I wander around, I start to meet a couple of people, and they sort of notice that I'm wearing these sort of strange clothes, and we start up a conversation, and the language has evolved a bit, but we manage to talk and so on. And so I start to ask them about about their life, and I tell them that I'm a time traveller from 2020, and when I say I'm a time traveller from 2020, they go, oh, really? And I begin to ask them about what's life like and what's going on there. So it turns out that, a lot of the things that people do are, not that dissimilar to what they're doing today. I mean, you still have different professions. You have accountants and greengrocers and painters. But those things are a bit less sort of, they don't really define your life in the same way that they do today. So when I'm talking to this fellow I'm talking to, then I say, what do you do? He says, what do I do? Well, I go for walks, and I sit quietly and look at my own mind, and I talk to the people around me. And no, I mean, like, how do you earn a living? It's like, how do I earn a living? I don't quite know what you mean by that. Like, everyone lives. But I mean, you must do something to make money. You mean, how do I contribute? How do I serve? Yeah, perhaps that's what I mean. Yes, how do I serve? Well, he said, yes, well, I serve by running a company that packages food. Okay, that's interesting, that's nice. Well, so not quite, there's a bit of a shift there. Like, normally we think that we do a job that we don't want to do in order to get money so that we can get the things that we do want. And he kind of looked at me with this kind of feeling, that's a bit strange, isn't it? Why would you just do something that you spend your life doing something that you don't want to do? No, we do something because we want to serve and we want to help. And, we support each other because of that. But you must get paid for it. Some money. He said, well, yeah, we don't have money in the same sense that you have, like, because in the old days, so we hear that people had this kind of illusion that money was this thing that you could actually have. And the whole economy was built on this sort of shared magical belief that there was a real thing called money and that you could manipulate it and so on. And really the only purpose of doing that was to get more money for the people who already had lots of it. Turns out you don't really need any of that kind of stuff. You see, in our time, what we do is we don't measure the amount of money a person has. What we do is we measure inequality. Really? What does that mean? Well, said my new friend, he said, well, what's life like where you are? What's the inequality index? I said, but what do you mean inequality index? Like the difference between the rich and the poor? Well, I guess in our time, the poor have like nothing. Maybe let's say maybe $1, and the rich have like $100 billion or more. So I guess like the inequality index is 100 billion. And he said, what? 100 billion? Are you kidding me? How can you possibly have a world where some people are worth 100 billion times that of others? It's crazy. He said, no. In our world, we have an inequality index of 10. That means that at most, a person has 10 times as much as any other person. And the amount of income that you earn is not rated by the amount of dollars that you earn, but by where you sit on the inequality index. So he said, for myself, I'm a 3 on the inequality index. I earn 3 times as much as somebody who's not serving or not contributing anything. But even if you don't serve or don't contribute anything, then you'll still get, you'll still live, you have a place to live, and you have water, and you have food, and you have all of the things you need. And I said, really? You mean you have like a social security net where you just give things out to people who haven't earned them? And he's like, sorry, I don't quite understand that. What do you mean you give things to people who haven't earned them? We're here on this, but does the sun give out only to people who've earned sunshine? Does the air only allow itself to be breathed by people who are worthy? Does the water only manifest wetness because somebody is worthy of drinking it? We are here together and we share what is given to us by this beautiful world. That's all. And nobody deserves to go hungry. Nobody deserves to not have a place to live. Nobody deserves to not be treated when they're sick. How can there possibly be a world where that doesn't happen? Well, kind of amazing, huh? It's a very, very, very different kind of system, but you still have things. You still have buildings and cars. You have cars. Cars. What's a car? And I explained to him a bit about what a car is. He said, well, we have different kinds of ways of transporting and getting around, but like you can see around here, mostly we just walk. Or, we ride a bicycle or something like that. And if we need to go further, we build our cities so we don't have to travel that far. But if we do need to go further, then, there's trains and there's various things. We can even fly on occasion. But, flying is very expensive because of the GC. Sorry, because of the what? The GC? Yeah, the GC, the garbage collection. I'm like, I'm sorry, what do you mean garbage collection? Well, he said, garbage collection. They also call it the green cost. GC, green cost, garbage collection. No, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, "What you mean you didn't pay a GC when in your day?" No. What's a GC? Well, GC is a concept. He said it's derived from computer programming. And you see, in our day, all the kids have to learn computer programming when they're at school. Because it's felt to be unethical to introduce people to a world that they don't understand. So if you're surrounded by machines that use computers, then you have to have an understanding of how computers work. Otherwise, you'll be a victim of the technology and not a master of it. Well, it seems to make sense. So in computer programming, they have this concept called garbage collection. And essentially it means that as a program is working, that it cleans up after itself. And when a program does that there's a certain cost to that it takes a certain amount of effort, and that can slow down a computer program, but it means that it's more safe and has less unexpected side effects from running in the long term. So this is why we sort of borrowed this phrase that everyone understands about garbage collection, and that's like all products have a GC. That means that all products have a price added to them to pay for what are the unexpected side effects. In the old days, he said, I believe that they used to call this externalities. And externality cost is the cost that any kind of economic activity has that harms something other than the producer and the consumer. So if I buy a cotton shirt, then the externalities are the carbon dioxide from the chopping down the forest to grow the cotton, the cost of the oil that's burnt to drive the tractor to plough the field, and all of these kinds of things. And all of these things have a cost in the environment, and that's all factored in to the GC. So it's the responsibility of the producer to make sure that the GC is accounted for. So everything has a GC. Huh, I said. So that must mean that, like, I guess things become a lot more expensive, a lot harder to get. And he said, well, it shifts the balance. Certain things become, more expensive. Certain things become less expensive. But at the end of the day, you're paying the actual price of something, and you're not just paying. If you don't include the GC, what you're paying is the price. Is you're subsidizing people to externalize their cost onto the environment. So these days we don't like to use the word externality because it's not really external, is it? When you pollute the atmosphere, the CO2, when it goes down and the climate change, it affects you. The toxins you put into the environment, they go into your bloodstream. It's not really external to you. So the idea of externality doesn't really count. So we just call it garbage collection. So the garbage collection, or the GC, is what something costs. And that's part of the economic price. And so you say, wow, that's a very different way of looking at things. And I said, well, what about, I notice people like walking around and looking around and wandering through the park, and I don't see too many people like using like cell phones or technology and these kinds of things. And he said, no, why would they? It's such a beautiful day. Why would you look at a screen or look at some technology on a day like today? Well, in our day, people seem to be addicted to the things. It seems like we're not the masters of our technology, but the technology's taken us over. We sort of forced to use it, even whether we like it or not. And he just sort of laughed and said, oh, we don't really think like that. We use our technology when it's useful. And I guess maybe over time, over hundreds of years, we've learnt to be a bit grown up about it, a bit adult about it, that there are certain things that technology is good for, and we can use it for that, and there are certain things that technology is not so good for. What about robots, I said? Did robots end up taking over the world, putting everybody out of work? This is one thing people are afraid of. And he just sort of laughed and said, why would they? And I said, well, see, in our world, what we're afraid of is that if you're a worker for a company, then your boss is going to realize that he can get your job done with just a few robots, and so humans will be put out of work, and the robots will do the work instead. But why would a boss do that? How is that possible? How could somebody even think like that? Well, I said, if someone's a CEO, then their responsibility is to maximize the profits. And he looked and he thought, he was kind of puzzled for a little while. He said, CEO, right? CEO, no, we have the OEC, not the CEO. So the boss of our company is called the OEC. Oh, really? What's the OEC? What's the OEC? The Orange Economic Caregiver. Instead of the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, we have the Orange Economic Caregiver, the OEC. So a boss is somebody whose primary role is to take care of the people that work for them. And they take this, and this is considered to be a sacred duty, that if somebody has given their trust to you, that they've entrusted their vulnerability to you, and that you have a sacred duty and a moral duty to look after them and to take care of their well-being. That's your primary concern as a boss, not to make profit, but to take care of the people who are working for you. In the economic sphere, of course, other people take care of somebody in medical or spiritual or emotional spheres, but you take care of them economically. But why is it the orange? Where does the orange come from? The Orange Economic Caregiver, OEC. He said, well, the word orange has this kind of history in our world. For hundreds of years, the color orange was associated with evil. and people remembered the orange Bliviator as the epitome of the evil of the old order, and the colour orange became just anathema to humanity, until eventually we realised that it wasn't actually the colour that was the problem, but that the colour orange was perfectly fine. So we rehabilitated it, and we call it the orange economic caregiver, because the idea of the orange economic caregiver, by turning the word CEO back to front, it turns the values of the boss back to front, so that the duty of a CEO and of a boss in the bad old days becomes, instead of to fire people, to dominate people, to abuse them, to yell at them, to extract economic good from them, the job of a boss becomes to care for people. Well, that's definitely a very different way of looking at it. So I want to ask, like, are there aliens? Sorry? He says, are there aliens? Like, aliens? Aliens? What are you talking about? Why would someone be alien? We don't have anyone alien. There's no countries anymore. There's no countries anymore. No, why would you draw boundaries over the earth and say you can have this and you can't have that? So weird. I know, right? So weird. The planet is just here. Who among us has the right to draw a boundary on it and claim to own it? Very, very strange. No, we don't have like ownership of land or resources, anything like that anymore. We don't have any aliens. Sorry. I mean, that's interesting, but I wasn't really thinking of that by aliens. I was thinking aliens like in the sky, like in other stars and things like that. You mean our friends in space? Yes, friends in space. Yeah. Why would you call them aliens? What's a very nasty word to call them. Anyway, look. No, friends in space. Yeah, there's plenty of those. We can go and chat with them later on if you like. There's a kind of galactic internet that we can communicate with them. Wow, that's amazing. How does that work? I mean, can you go to the other planets and so on? It's like, well, not really. No, I mean, the speed of light still has a hard limit, and we can't travel to other galaxies and so on. And one of the things that we learnt was that the dream of traveling to other stars and other galaxies was really something that came from our lack of connection and our alienation from who we are and our connection with our planet. In reality, we are part of this organism, and our responsibility is to be here to look after this planet. And we realized that actually for a lot of times we thought that we were a cancer or a virus that was going to be destroying our host. But we realized that actually our responsibility is to be here and to take care of our planet and to make sure that it gets kept as beautiful as possible. So no, we don't travel between the stars, but we do communicate with civilizations. There's lots of them out there. Wow, that's amazing. I mean, in my day, we suspected that there were interstellar civilizations and races and things, but we couldn't find any trace of it. We searched and searched in the skies, but there was no sign of any alien life. And then my friend just laughed and said, "Oh yeah, that's because they had you on mute." I'm sorry, they what? They had you on mute. Like that's what they do when a civilization's growing. See, they don't want to be spammed by all of these kind of trolls and idiots from these growing gauche civilizations who are going to be sending all of these belligerent messages and all of these trolling messages and stuff like that. So they just sort of keep people on mute by default. And when civilizations are growing up, they tried, in the past, civilizations tried to mold or influence the growth of different civilizations, but it didn't really work. When the more you try to influence it, the more they'd rebel. And it seems that for the most part, you just have to let worlds and civilizations evolve as they will. And, a lot of times it doesn't actually work out. A lot of times people end up just destroying their planet or having a nuclear war, or lots of civilizations don't really make it, but a few of them do. And when you make it and you attain to real civilization, then the galactic civilization will unmute you and you can join in the conversation. Yeah, it's fun. You can do, they have like kind of, talent shows And, there's like a sort of galactic Twitter. You can, chat with people from different planets and these kinds of things. Wow, that's, you can share like sort of cute cat photos, with the sort of galactic alien cats and so on. So it's amazing, right? So it really is an incredible world that you built here. And he said, but just one last thing I want to ask you about. He said, look, I said, you can see that this robe that I'm wearing. I'm a Buddhist monk, and I'm just wondering, is there like Buddhism here? And so he said, sorry, what do you mean? Is there Buddhism here? Well, like, we're followers of the teacher, the Buddha, and the Buddha taught that life is suffering, that we can't avoid that aging and death and so on is natural, and yet that even though we can't avoid it, but we can live skillfully in a world where this happens. And even though suffering within ourselves and suffering in the world around us is something that's universal, and we, in a way, we can't ever stop it or escape it, but we can minimize it and we can reduce it. We can't, when we say we can't escape it within the world, but we can pursue a spiritual path. And the Buddha said that the spiritual path was to practice by letting go, and that the suffering is really created from our desires and our cravings. If we let go of those desires and cravings through practicing meditation, through living a good life, through practicing kindness and so on, then we can somehow be freed of all this suffering. And he just looked at me with this kind of strange look. I said, what's wrong? He said, I'm just having trouble kind of grokking what you're asking me. I feel like you're asking me, is this a world where everyone believes that up is up and water is wet? I mean, how could anybody not believe those things that you're just saying? It's self-evident, isn't it? And yeah, actually it kind of is, right? But in my day, a lot of people don't actually believe that. It's weird, right? I don't get it personally, that it's weird, but like a lot of people think that somehow only if they have enough or get enough, that somehow they control things and that they can get rid of suffering and that they can be happy. And he just looked at me and said, no, you're kidding. Seriously, that's how people think. I said, what? That's so weird. Why would they think that? Honestly, I don't know. It just seems weird to me as well. But, one of my jobs as a Buddhist monk, I sort of try to live my life according to these values. And I also try to talk about these values with other people so that, they can see that by letting go, it's okay. They can see, but by living a life based on caring and giving, that actually it's all right, that things actually get better in the long term. And I try to teach this and to share this around. And he says, that's interesting. And how does that go? He said, well, mixed results, I can say. And, but it's fun. I enjoy it. So, I do it because that's what gives meaning to my life. And he said, well, that's good. And so he said, well, look, I'm going to have to be getting on back to my family. I've got to do some family evenings meditation, and we're going to be going and sitting together. Would you like to come and join us? Sure, why not? I've got all of the time in the world. I don't know if my time machine has a reverse mechanism on it. And if it did, would I want to go back? And I'm thinking, all of those people back there in 2020, in this kind of benighted world, who are living in this way where they have this fear of what's going to happen in the future. They have this anxiety that things are going to collapse and fall apart. And they have this confusion about what's going to be real and what is not going to be real and what matters and what doesn't matter. And should I go back to them and try to help them out, or should I just kind of stay here because it actually seems pretty nice here and might be and might enjoy it? So that's where my story ends for now. That's my choice, I guess. And so I hope you enjoyed my little story of the future and story imagining a world where some other way is possible. And if there is one lesson to be learned from this series of talks, one thing which I would like you very much to take back with you. It is the idea that our future is something that we create through our choices, and that the kinds of choices that we make are our own. Don't be limited in what you choose, and don't just believe what other people tell you might be possible. The ideologies, the systems, the methods that we have in the world around us are all invented by people for their own reasons. Governments, economies, societies, classes, castes, all the corporations, the systems, the departments, all of those things, they're made by people for people's reasons. And we can make other systems for other reasons. There's no reason why we can't. Throughout history, people have organized themselves in all kinds of different ways and have lived in all kinds of different ways. Humans are very adaptable. Maybe my future, the future that I imagine, isn't your future. You might imagine one where things work out somewhat differently. But I would like to think that if we can possibly imagine a future that's worth living in, a future that we might like to actually be in, then this might be a first step towards making some changes that might actually make that world that we would love to live in. So I offer this Dhamma to you for your reflection, and I hope that you have gained something from this course.